So, all right. So my name is Saul Hansen, the author of My Friend Merlin. Just came out and collaborated with my nephew Moab Croft, and we're going to go over how he created the language for my book. And so I think that every fantasy author dreams of having a different language for their characters, kind of the style of J.R.R. Tolkien, and not many are able to pull it off. And I certainly would not have been able to unless I was able to tap into his talents, which is pretty sweet. And so I have been trying to get together with him for months to try and go over this language with him. And so first of all, we're going to go over his background and how he was introduced to foreign languages, and which I suspect helped him form his love and affinity for learning languages. So could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, etc., just
right.
A little bit?
Yeah. So my family's in the military. So I lived in France at one point, and I was young enough to where I learned the language, but I was also old enough to where I had to learn it by learning the rules and all of the logic of the language, not just listening to it and then knowing it because I was that young. And that just kind of over time that made me more interested in languages. It didn't really happen then. It was about 2 years ago, year and a half to 2 years ago, where I was just thinking about what if this happened? What if my specific thought was actually, what if a bunch of Greek or not nomads, but refugees came up from some war and then went up to England, and so I made up a fake situation where they go to England and then it creates a new language, like a Greek English language.
Kind of how with the Philippines, there's a tremendous amount of influence from Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
French, from English,
Yeah.
and it kind of shapes the language. Kind of that same type of thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well, sweet. And so you talked a little bit about how when you were 13 you started fiddling with the language, and then about 2 years ago you picked it up again and kind of took it to a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
And so just explain a little bit more about Moab. First thing, if you like Rubik's Cubes, I hope that you still have your Rubik's Cube videos up on YouTube and things like that. He's pretty good at that type of thing, but he wanted to be able to get ahead a little bit, and so he just went ahead and taught himself calculus as you do, so he could test out and get ahead. And so he's pretty smart, pretty bright, and when I'm talking about making a language, it isn't just surface level, switching around a few words and stuff. It's kind of like Pig Latin.
Mm-hmm.
It's the grammar, the rules, the conjugations, and it's the real thing, and it's pretty hard to do. I was fortunate enough to learn one language pretty well, and a second foreign language, okay, and it's not too bad. But from studying those languages, I have fallen in love with languages and learning languages, and know a little bit about what it takes to learn a language,
Mm-hmm.
and that it requires you to understand at least some of the rules and how things work. The mechanics of a language. So when you start developing a new language, how do you start?
Well, it depends whether or not it's a priori or a posteriori. A priori being a language that is completely new. It's not based off of another language. That doesn't mean that's not to say that its features aren't similar to other languages, because that's impossible to do, because most features are represented somewhere in some language. But they're not based on another language. And then there's a posteriori, which is a language that you make that's descended from a language that actually exists in the real world. So if it's a posteriori, then I kind of look what is the situation that's arising that's causing the evolution of the language, and then I try to like model that and then how that changed, and then I map it out and then write a phonology first based off of how the sound changes, then the grammar changes, what languages does it interact with, like what's the culture. And then a priori is a little bit simpler to get started with. I normally just pick some features that I want and the phonology, and then I start writing it from there. Nice.
Okay. And so, how long does it take to make a language typically from scratch?
It depends, because sometimes like it depends on the language you want to make, like because there are different types. There are engineered languages, Oxlings, the a priori ones, Artlangs. It depends really. I would say on average, probably 1 to 3 weeks to make. But
and
again,
and how many hours a day, of those 1 to 3 weeks?
It depends on my commitment to the language, because sometimes I have an idea and I'm like, I really want to do this, and I can get it written out all in less than a week. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I have an idea, but I'm not very interested in it, and I'll just do it randomly. So it can be anywhere from like maybe like half an hour a day to I can just sit down and do it for like 3 to 5 hours.
Wow.
Like uninterrupted.
Wow, shoot, that's awesome. Okay, so for this one that you made for the language for my friend Merlin, did it take shorter or longer to make this language?
A little bit longer, because there were some things that I hadn't really done before in languages, which was trying to evolve the consonant mutation system, because that's pretty complex, and also trying to evolve the vowels along with that. It was a little bit more complicated than I'm used to, so that was a little more difficult. But
okay, and so we had discussed this a little bit before, and so just go over it again. So with can you explain like how consonant mutation happened and why it was advantageous as it evolved? It had something to do with like the mechanics of how people speak.
Right. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, and there aren't really people that like it. There weren't linguists at the time writing down, like,
of course,
our consonants are changing in these specific situations, because in the past we realized that like it happens gradually over time. One example I kind of look at is like, I imagine the sound f, which is very light, and it's made just by your lips, not like a traditional f where it's with your teeth and your bottom lip. And if you have a lot of consonants in the back, it can kind of make it so that you don't even pronounce that sound, because it's farther forward in the mouth compared to consonants more in the back. And over time that can actually develop semantic meaning, because say like prepositions typically will end like in a specific type of sound, and that sound will affect consonants in a specific way. Mm-hmm. And so then that semantically can eventually mean that that the way when it shifts that initial consonant, that means like it can actually take in the meaning of the preposition, or imply that there needs to be a preposition. That's kind of how I imagine that it had evolved.
That's interesting. So kind of, I guess in a similar way that English, as far as where one word will affect another one, they almost like combine into one.
That's called gemination.
Gemination, and that's like does not goes to doesn't.
Not that. Sorry, I thought you meant something that ends in one consonant and then another word begins in another consonant. Mm-hmm. Like how.
That's called gemination.
Yeah. Like some more. I want some more.
Oh, sure.
How the M's go together. I thought you were talking about that. That's called gemination.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Gotcha. Yeah, I remember visiting with someone who went to Jamaica, and they said, "What's happening, man?" And they just over time it shortened to wapm.
What?
and that was what's happening, man, and just shortened. And so if you said what, it's like what's happening, man.
That's cool.
And so there were different things like that. And so is that kind of like how things evolve over time and become a semantic sound?
Like the slang becomes the new norm eventually, and that's like an example of that is Vulgar Latin is what evolved into the Romance languages, not the official Latin language.
Interesting.
Because they standardized it, and so that didn't change. It's just like how you have African American vernacular in America. It's not really written, it's pretty much only spoken, and it's evolving while standard English is staying the same.
Yeah,
That's how Vulgar Latin.
Gotcha.
Like,
Cause yeah, it's like the common language,
Mhm.
you know, and it's like we get more words in the English dictionary almost every year,
Mhm.
where they keep adding them.
Yeah,
You know, it's like
it's ever growing.
yeah, words that probably shouldn't be. Some of them, you know, that I think we got from texting. You know?
Yeah.
Things like that. Okay, well, cool. All right, so what other languages influenced the creation of this one for my friend Merlin?
So first, I based it off of Old Irish because a lot of the legends that you used in the book were from Celtic or were of Celtic origin, and so I thought it would be best if it was a Celtic language. Plus, Avallon, I'm pretty sure it was on the island of Man.
Yeah, and actually, when I was looking through it, there's a couple different places, and they the people from those regions argue that it was there, and they kind of like compete for like, no, it was here,
Yeah.
no, it was here, and but because it was so long ago, and it's not, you know, they're not sure if it was an actual place,
Mhm.
you know, for sure. You know, no one really knows where it was.
Yeah.
And so I picked the Isle of Man because it was the most convenient to make the story work,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why I told you that place.
Mhm.
And so I bet the people from the Isle of Man who want, you know, who've always claimed that Avalon was based there are going to be like, yes, good. Whereas the people from the other locations are probably going to be really pissed. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, you can't make everybody happy, I guess. When I told you the Isle of Man, I had done some research into like the different areas and such, but I did not study a great deal into the languages that surrounded it, like the different areas. So what were the different languages that were spoken around that area?
So around in the Middle Ages, it was Isle of Man had people speaking Middle Irish, which eventually turned into the language of Manx, which is very similar to Irish. But if you had people to the east, you had the Welsh and the Cornish to the east, kind of a little more south, and then you also had the Anglo-Saxons speaking Old English, and you also had the Danes coming from north, and they were speaking Old Norse. And so the linguistic influences that I used were Old Norse, Old English, and primarily Welsh. Cornish, not as much.
Fantastic. That's pretty sweet. Okay. So what aspects of this language were the most challenging?
Like I said before, it was just the consonant mutation having that evolve, because it was kind of hard to find out what Old Irish really used as its mutation, and how could I like make it seem feasible in its evolution.
Gotcha. Because historically, we don't have that entire language, right?
No, pretty much it's all reconstruction.
Okay, sweet. Okay. All right. So, one of the questions that I had, which is, you know, related to this, was what does a present tense conjugation tree look like for Avalonic? And so, we'll get into that in a little bit, for what each of these present tense pronouns sounds like. Yeah, it's like, is there anything else you want to explain before we jump into your journal?
Yeah, these are just the personal pronouns and how they decline to the nominative, accusative, dative, vocative, and genitive case. That's pretty much what that is.
And so can you, just in case we didn't get it before, can you explain what each one of those is?
Yeah.
And like kind of break it down for us.
So the nominative is the subject. Like I do something, the word I is in the nominative case because it's the subject. So that's what it is. All of these will be subjects, and that they can only be used for that. Then accusative, dative, those are objects. Dative is the indirect object. But I had it so that the accusative and dative kind of merge together. And so you could use the same word for either of them. Though I think in nouns, I think I might have left them separate, but I'm not sure. I think I know that I didn't put genitive into the nouns. But anyway, vocative is if you're talking to someone, like if in a prayer, like you hear when someone says, "Oh God," that when they're talking to him, that's the English equivalent of it, because you're saying that you're talking to him, and that's what the vocative is. So if I said me, that's kind of weird. That's like I'm talking to myself, like, "Oh dear me," like that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So you might get that in Shakespeare.
Yes. Yeah, you would probably more likely hear that in poetry rather than actual a conversation.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I included it for sake of continuity. And then genitive is the possessive pronoun. Yeah, like my thing.
Got it. So going through this would be like mine, yours. Is that how each of those works?
Yeah. I have the wrong things up there for it. I'm not gonna bother to correct that right now, but yeah, it means like mine, yours, it's, our, yours plural, and then their.
Got it. And so just curious about the neutral one here. In what use would that be employed?
What do you mean neutral?
And so for its, for its thing, and maybe that's just a bad question. It's probably my, not knowing languages really well. Probably a bad question.
Oh, no. So it means like if you're talking about, like if you're saying something like you reference something, you say maybe this is that, and then you want to refer to something else as belonging to the original thing. You say that is its thing, and so its would be this er.
Okay. Got it. And so we'd use it all the time. Like
in English,
yeah, you use it all the time. Okay, well, cool. And so let me grab the camera and we'll go through your journal real quick.
Okay, here we go. All right, yeah. Okay, I did pronounce that right.
Nice.
So yeah, me, mis, mib, mon, tu, sein, sib, don, es, sig, ei, eir, sni, sne, muid, ar, siv, sig, suv, tub, sed, set, sent, same.
Nice. Jeez. Okay, so my first question is that there's a couple of these that resemble a little bit of like Latin-based languages. So my first question is, how close is like Irish-based languages to to Latin-based languages?
So an interesting thing, actually, I'll just do it right here. So you have Proto-Indo-European, which is the languages that like all Germanic languages, all Slavic, all Baltic languages come from this. All Latin languages, so the Romance languages, all Celtic languages come from this. But different than from the others, it evolved into the it was Celtic Latin languages, which then evolved into the Latin languages and then the Celtic languages.
Interesting.
And so they actually are a lot more closely related than other languages are to Latin.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, that is an interesting observation, because yes, Celtic languages are a lot closer to Latin-based languages than, say, English.
Okay, sure. Wow. How about that? And so and that's why if you spoke a Latin-based language, it might be easier to learn Gaelic than if you're in English, like a native English speaker.
Maybe with the vocabulary, the grammar of it is different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
It'd be probably about the same level of difficulty.
Wow. All right. It's just a tough language.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very cool. All right. So go ahead and walk us through this.
So when you first mentioned to me that I should make a language for it, I just pulled out the journal and I just wrote out a basic thing. I knew immediately I want it to be based off of Old Irish, but I don't want it to be the same as all of the other Irish-based languages. So I had it evolve separately. Then I listed out all the cases and things that I wanted the nouns to change for. So nominative, accusative, vocative, then the genders of it, singular, plural. Same thing with adjectives. I decided I wanted to have adjectives kind of mapped to this, and then that was my basic idea. And then later in it, I did research whether or not I could actually make it feasibly evolve into this system, which it turned out it works pretty well. I did the same thing with verbs, and then pronouns.
And so just to go back to the masculine and feminine type of thing, say in English we don't have that so much, right?
Mm-hmm. We do have remnants of it. You know how the people call boats she, or...
Oh yeah, for sure.
It actually is a remnant from Old English where it was a feminine noun.
Gotcha, okay. Because in Spanish, it's extremely, it's used in every single word, the masculine and feminine.
Yeah, same in French.
Yeah, and so I remember, hearing a story where, this gentleman, tried to say, he loved someone, but the way that he said it was basically said that he loved a man instead of a woman when he was trying to say to a woman.
Oh, okay.
And just because it ended with an O and it should have ended with an A. And so just something like that. So this language has that same type of function then.
Yeah, it's not exactly like Spanish, because the Spanish gender system evolved in such a way, certain words you can actually switch vowels and that'll change its gender.
Mm-hmm.
This language doesn't really have that. A word has a set gender and it doesn't switch.
Got it.
But the genders will affect how adjectives decline to them and how the noun will decline.
Got it. Okay. And so, say in English, we've got so many irregular verbs, and we've got so many exceptions to the rule. Whereas in Spanish there are very few, and then in French I think there are fewer than English, but more than Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. And so with this one, is similar to Gaelic, is it going to be something where there are a lot, where you've just got to memorize them for almost every single word?
Well, I thought about it this way, in that it would be a relatively small community speaking Avllonic.
Mm-hmm.
And
which
they
is
would
totally true, yeah.
And they would keep records because they were they just kept records, and they all have very good memories and stuff. So I was thinking, wouldn't that tend to make more irregularities, so there'd be more irregular verbs and nouns? And I thought about it, but I actually came to the conclusion that I didn't think it would, because I feel like the initial conditions, once they started really speaking Avllonic, like it would kind of just stick and they wouldn't really feel a need to change, because I don't think slang would be something that would develop from this culture that spoke it. So it's probably the same in, like, there are many in French, but not as much as English, and that there are many in this, but not nearly as much as in an actual Gaelic language.
Got it. Okay, sweet. All right, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, and I went through here, and I went through, like, how could I have consonant mutation work, and I just wrote out basic stuff, basic rules of it, and then I looked up Old Irish phonology, and then looked at it, its vowels versus consonants, and then how some basic changes I wanted to happen from Old Irish to Avllonic. And then after that, I put all, like, what I wanted Avllonic to have, basically, and then all of its exceptions were marked and written down here. And then I created a sound shift, like how sounds would shift basically over time. Like, and one of the things I like is Old Irish, the word for the language was goidhelg, and that would be how it's pronounced. But in Avllonic, it's gaidhelg. But then I also wanted to kind of like as I was saying, they don't really want to change what's already there. So the people that spoke Avllonic kind of kept some of the same spellings that were in Old Irish. And so even though it's spelt OI with that accent, it's pronounced differently. And I just wanted to keep some of that.
Gotcha.
Just
interrupt real quick. I met a guy and he speaks Norwegian, and he said that when he met Danes, who spoke Danish, he said that it sounds exactly like Norwegian, just with marbles in your mouth.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a similar type thing going on?
Not really. There's a huge reason why that happened, and it was because the Danes actually, like, Norwegian was in a different branch of the Scandinavian family, but because the Danes, like, kind of conquered them at one point and just ruled them so much, they basically made Norwegian more like Danish. And so there are two types. There's Bokmål, and then there's also Nynorsk. Nynorsk is the newest one, I think, where they're trying to revert back to its older roots. And then Bokmål is more like the one that the Danish influenced one. I'm pretty sure. I might be getting it reversed, but
Gotcha.
There are two types, and that's why it's like that, because the grammar is virtually identical between the two languages, but they're vastly different in pronunciation.
Got it.
Yeah. Moving back onto this, then I mapped out how exactly lenition eclipsis would happen, which are consonant mutation types. Lenition is typically where a vowel becomes extended, or it becomes like an affricate, meaning it's no longer a stop consonant. And then eclipsis is basically where a consonant's either changed slightly, it's still a stop consonant, or it changes into an entirely new consonant, but that's still a stop consonant. And then if both occurred, I had a table for that as well. And then, you can see I had like a little test bubble where I would put stuff in, and I would conjugate it in my head and write it down and see how it looked, how it sounded, and see if that was an okay process.
Nice. And so can you give an example of a stop consonant in English and how to be used in a common sentence?
The T in stop, or the P in stop.
Got it.
It's the stop consonant because it stops flow completely. That's why they call it, like, airflow completely. Fricatives are things where it's almost stopping it, like those are fricatives. Affricates are where it starts as a stop consonant and then lets air out, like ksh or ch. And those are affricates.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that. That's pretty sweet.
No problem. And then I came up, after I had all the sound changes, I came up with the orthography, how I was going to have it written, and basically standardized the spelling. And then I had a few things, like I gave an example of how I would have adjectives decline, like the word for young, if it's masculine, it's ok, but if it's female, it's ocha, and that's kind of how I had it. And then I stopped, and then I moved on into a different language right here. But yeah, that was pretty much all I had in this. I have some notes in other journals, but I didn't bring them with me.
Man, thank you so much for showing those.
Yeah, no problem.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Moab. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome.
All right. So in Spanish, there are 3 kinds of verbs, like AR, ER, and IR.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there anything like that in this type of scenario?
I think that I did put some. I think I did put some verb types in here. I don't know if I have them strictly written down here.
Oh, sure. That's okay.
I did have different types of verbs, like just like how in nouns I had the masculine and feminine cases. I think that
Because you have like a masculine, feminine, and neutral, correct?
I believe that I do have the neutral. Like I said, I couldn't find the original papers, so I'm using these. Once I find those, I'll let you know for sure.
Cool. Okay. Right on. And so, so at the end of My Friend Merlin, there's a spell that Merlin basically gives, and I wanted it to be an Avalonic because I figured, man, it'd be really cool if it was like a legit language that was, conjugated properly and everything. But like, it would take me probably a year to do what you do in 3 weeks. And so, speaking to the kid who taught himself, calculus so he could test out of it, and so, with that, how did you translate that entire spell? Like, how did you go about that?
Well, I think I might, if I did it in this one, like as I remember, I have that process actually, or I have the process in here, I think.
Nice. Yeah, double check, make sure it's still going. Nice. Still.
If I don't, then I don't know where I did that. Yeah, but I know I did it in one of my journals. I have tons of journals.
No worries.
Yeah, here, look at this.
Oh, right here? Okay.
Yeah, where I wrote it down originally.
Cool. And this might be kind of cool. Nowhere else in the book do I have what it means. And so you should read what it really is, so that people know. And the only way that they'll know is if they watch this video.
Oh yeah, no, that's interesting. So yeah, it says, "Magics all mark and forsake her now, and leave her barren, thy gifts no more to share." And yeah, that was basically a spell uttered by Merlin on the enemy of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then what did the translation go to, and how do you pronounce it properly?
So I'll try to pronounce it properly. So it's a Trachithi au nodithi anis ulle drithe sik au fachit sik unricha nimoran ranaidon goat.
That's sweet. So there's no way I could have gotten anywhere close to doing that justice. I'd have to listen to that over and over again. So one more time. How about you do it one more time?
Trachithi au nodithi anis ulle drithe sik au fachit sik unricha nimoran ranaidon goat.
That's so cool. And so, just another question, just out of curiosity, would someone who speaks Gaelic be able to recognize some of these words?
I would hope so. I don't know how, because I made this also pretty impacted by Old Norse and Old English.
Cool.
So it would be some of the vocabulary would be a little bit different, but I think that they would be able to recognize some of it, like the more basic stuff. Yeah,
that's pretty sweet. Well, and once it's on YouTube, then I guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
that's super cool. And so I've got a couple other questions too. So now, because I think that anyone who's writing a fantasy novel dreams of being able to have a legitimate language in their book, kind of like how J.R.R. Tolkien did.
Yeah.
How he created Elvish.
Oh yeah.
And he, create all these actual languages you can learn.
He did a really good job.
He did a really good job, man. And so, if other people wanted to do that and they wanted to be able to create another language, and they weren't able to do it themselves in a similar situation as I am, where they either just don't have the time to put into it, or they just don't have the affinity that someone like you has.
Yeah.
So if they were to like hire you to do it, do you think you could create them a language as quickly as you did for me in like 3 weeks?
I think so, depending on like how complicated they want it to be. There was a language I've been working on the past few months, kind of going, like I've been a little bit disconnected from the language creation scene just because I'm trying to kind of refresh my mind on it so I don't get too focused on it.
Of course. Because you've got your studies, you gotta keep
Yeah.
going. Right.
Plus, I was also blanking on ideas for new languages.
Oh,
I just
sure.
couldn't think of anything new. So, but that language was so much more complicated than all of my other ones. It would have taken longer than this one, I think.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But if it was for other people, I think yeah, I could do it in about the same time.
So the one that you're making right now, is it a from scratch language or is it based on?
From scratch. Yeah.
Wow, okay. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It has been months in the making so
Mhm.
far, and it's still going.
Yeah. Like, cause I'll find a piece and I'm like, I just don't like that anymore, and I'll erase that part of the grammar and rewrite it. Like, yeah.
That's sweet. That's fantastic. So I know that like in Hollywood, right, there are different movies that are made where they invent languages for it, things like that. Is that something you would ever do as like a part-time gig, just for fun?
I would honestly love to do that. There are so many more people that are more qualified than me, because I don't have a degree and I'm not really planning on getting a degree because I'm going into physics.
Being a linguist, right?
Yeah. One of the guy that made the Game of Thrones languages, he also did it in like Thor. He made the language for the Grey Elves. He also he's helped with tons of other languages, and he's like the go-to for the
Entertainment industry.
And so for anyone else to kind of like dethrone him from it,
Would take a lot.
yeah, and I am nowhere near his skill level in language making. So yeah.
I was going to ask you if you knew anything about how that works. So because I didn't. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. And so, is there anything else you would like to share about this language that anyone would find interesting or unique, or that you're especially proud of?
Let's see. There's, I don't know about unique. Give me a second.
No problem. No problem. And while you're thinking, I'm gonna check and make sure it's still going. Sweet, it's still going.
One thing is I got rid of the genitive case for nouns, I guess. But there is a special preposition to show possession. For that, I don't have that written down because
It's on some of your other notes.
Yes, but like you don't need to do that. But like I don't know. I'm just proud, I guess, of just my vowel system.
Nice.
Because I think I worked hard on it, and I think I did a good job with the evolution of that.
And so, on that platform where you can create languages, did you create this language on that platform?
I uploaded it to it, but I did not use it to make it. Like that, I guess that's kind of the thing. Like the language platform, it's not really for the expressive making of the language, it's for keeping track of you making it, because I would say that, and I think a lot of people would agree, the fastest or most efficient way to make a language is either to do it by hand in a book or like in a journal, or to use like a spreadsheet and then upload it later. It's just easy. It's the website's really good for organization.
Got it. So it's for like recording it later.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were, I guess, extensive enough on all the different notes and such like that, can someone go there and actually start learning it?
Yeah. I created what do you call it? An auxlang, which is so like if instead of everybody learning each other's language, everybody learns just one language, kind of like a universal language. But the way I made it was just to be used in the sciences, because most people in the Western world that work on science speak a Germanic language. Even if they're not native Germanic speakers, they still speak one. Like English is the most prominent one, then Dutch, German, Danish, all those things, because that's where that, like, if you can imagine, the Nobel Peace Prize given in Sweden, so
Oh, interesting. Sure.
it's in the Germanic regions of Europe. That's kind of where it's centralized, where all of the big strides in physics are being made. And so I tried to make one that kind of combined all of these Germanic languages into one, and I actually tried to get people to learn it on the website, but then the website, I mean, you can learn off of it, but it would be a bit tedious, so I wouldn't recommend it.
Got it. Cool. And so can it be found though on there?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it called?
Avllonic, so it's I'll write it down. Just can't spell. Okay.
That's cool.
I think that's what it is. I honestly don't know.
Can't remember.
Here we go. I spelled it wrong. My own language, I spelled it wrong.
Yeah.
I can just edit that out of the video.
Oh, no worries.
No, just messing it up too. No. Instead of it's one N and one N, two L's. I got it mixed up and I put two N's in there.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. And again, what is that platform called?
Con Workshop.
Con Workshop.
CON then workshop.com.
Right on. Okay.
All right, Moab. So how can we find you?
Well, you can check YouTube. I have a really weird name, so it's Eccentric Tuber. You check there. I have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. You can contact me basically through a comment, because I'm not gonna give away my email right away. But if you show interest in a comment, you can. I'll definitely reply to that, because I get notified.
Fantastic. So for everyone who has watched us all the way to the end, if you are a writer and are writing a book where you need a language, then Moab can be your go-to for being able to hire that out and get a legitimate language that you could actually learn if you wanted to put the time in, and that way you can have something that's absolutely unique and specific to your story. And again, thank you so much, Moab. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.